waiting for the thing.
Okay, we are ready when you are, Mayor McClure.
I'll call this meeting of the Seward City Council to order. It is Monday, July 8th, 2024 at 7 p.m. Deputy Chief, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Roll call for tonight's meeting. Finch? Here. Osenga?
Here.
Calhoun?
Here.
Wells?
Here.
Barnwell?
Here.
Kreitz?
Here.
And Mayor McClure.
Here.
Okay, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. We now have citizen comments on any subject except items scheduled for public hearing. We do have one public hearing item. You'll have 3 minutes. There's a 36-minute total. And if you've signed in over there, you'll get the first shot at it, and then I'll take shows of hands after that. So you can speak on anything relating to tonight's agenda or just pretty much anything at all. Mr. Clerk, who's signed in?
So there are 3 people signed in to speak. First on the list is Bruce Jaffa.
Okay. And when you come up, we need your name and whether you live inside or outside the city limits. Please.
Bruce Jaffa, outside city limits. Madam Mayor, Council, Administration, thank you for the opportunity tonight and join your meeting. I have something just really brief. Events that I see in the public cause me a little concern. I think that all of us who move in positions of influence have to guard against let our ego overtake our wisdom. I think there is a great deal of that going on today in the world. There was a quote, I think some of you may have seen the movie Patton, where the general was reminded that Caesar had a slave go by his side and remind him that he was immortal. He was a man and that he would die. And no matter how big he was or powerful he was just a man. I think it's a humbling thing. I think it's important for us to remember that. I had the opportunity to listen to Alan Dershowitz 2 weeks ago, who is a constitutional lawyer who came to the state of Alaska, presented at several venues. He's a fascinating man. He started as a flaming liberal, if you will, in the 60s, defending some strange groups of people. But we know him in modern times for defending others. His view is that the worst speech needs to be protected. The most egregious speech needs to be protected so that all speech is protected. It doesn't mean that you need to be a brilliant person, that if you have an opinion and you speak it, and in our country, in civility, expressing your view, getting it out in public, may win some converts, maybe not. But it was fascinating to listen to the man who is, he's written 40 books, he's in his mid-80s, he's still full of game. That's all I got tonight. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, who's next?
Susie Erbach.
My name is Susie Erbach. I live inside the city limits, and I realize that you have my letter in the packet, but I just wanted to, speak briefly that I appreciate Mayor and Council members for discussing the annual fall flooding issues within Forest Acres subdivision. I am one of the property owners that deal with this issue. It impacts both our land and, more seriously, our homes. Since the levee road was built, the excessive rains won't allow drainage we need. We constantly worry about our homes flooding. I urge you to take the suggestion from the Seward Bear Creek Flood Service Area Program Manager, which is for the city of Seward to dig and maintain a trench on the south side of the levee road from Diamond Boulevard down towards the Seward Highway. This way we can use the trenching that we have put in our own yards to meet up with that trench to drain off some of the excessive water. If you have any additional questions or want more information, please reach out to me. I am available, but thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Mr. Clerk?
Micah Van Buskirk.
Hello, I am Micah Van Buskirk, and I live inside city limits. And I sent an email, and I hope every one of you was able to look through that. I just wanted to quickly go over that. On your discussion list today is to go over the Federal Lands Access Program grant. That was a process started many, many years ago in 2016. The community of Lowell Point got together after a really horrible rock mudslide, and we were not able to get to our community for a day, and wrote a letter of just sort of help us. We cannot continue with the road this way. The road, and this was before the landslide, before the major avalanches and the storm surge. And so we started a series of meetings where we met with our state and borough and federal legislators, and the Park Service and the city and DNR. I mean, I listed all the entities that were at those meetings. We had 3 different meetings, roundhouse meetings, roundtable meetings, where we got together and tried to figure out how could we come up with a plan for improvements to Lowell Point Road, because the safety concerns on that road were significant and are even more significant now. It was a big deal and is still a big process. The Senator Sullivan's office recommended that they attended, they sent someone to come to our meetings and recommended that we apply for this Federal Lands Access Program grant, which we did. And we were awarded the city, sorry. It was a partnership between Lowell Point Community Council, the City of Seward, and the National Park Service. The City of Seward agreed to pay the 9% match on the grant. So they were the main signatory, but we all worked together to write the grant. A $2.5 million grant for the engineering of a large-scale safety improvements to the road. That project has started, the engineering has begun, and what I think you guys will have in your packet tonight are the 3 options that they are considering. And I think it's up to you guys to make a decision. One of the options, my understanding, is that we just use the rest of the grant to do some little spot fixes. And I want to encourage you to not do that, but to let this process continue. There is a lot of support, not just at the city level, but the federal, state, and borough level, to find some long-term improvements to that road safety issues. And to let this engineering process proceed, design, get a shovel-ready project so that we can get some more funding for the actual repairs to that road down the road. I know you guys have a lot of things on that you're budgeting for, but I just don't want you to lose sight of this. It's been a long process, and not to cut it short here. If that makes sense. If you have any questions, I have thousands of pages of documents that I would love to share or explain any of the concerns. I know myself as a parent, when I had 2 toddlers, I actually would stop on either side of the road and unbuckle my children, because I didn't want to have to make the decision of which kid to save if my car went off the side of the road. And it's a real concern for those of us driving it every day.
Thank you. And that's all that's signed up. Does anyone else wish to speak? All you got to do is raise your hand and I'll bring you up here. Is there anyone in the hall that wants to speak? Are you? No? Anyone here wishing to speak? All these people. Okay, I'll close this portion and move on to the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve and a second, please.
I'll move for the approval of tonight's agenda and consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any changes that anyone wants to make? Okay, I'm seeing none. Mr. Clerk, I guess we're ready to vote.
Voting on the approval of tonight's agenda and consent agenda, Osenga,
Yes.
Finch,
Yes.
Barnwell,
Yes.
Kreitz,
Yes.
Calhoun,
Yes.
Wells,
Yes.
and Mayor McClure.
Yes.
Okay, your agenda and consent agenda have been approved, and approved on the consent agenda are the June 10th, 2024 City Council meeting minutes, the introduction of ordinance 2024- amending Seward City Code Title III Personnel. Resolution 2024-036, accepting a grant from Alaska Homeland Security for cybersecurity in the amount of $40,000 and appropriating funds. Resolution 2024-037, approving the renaming the east portion of the north-south right-of-way currently known as Olympia Road to Phoenix Road, located within the Gateway Subdivision Hilltop Edition and the Gateway Subdivision Edition Number 2. And Resolution 2024-038, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Electric Power Systems in the amount of $115,849.60, plus a 10% contingency for upgrades at the Fort Raymond substation. And that concludes the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 proclamations, and I've asked my assistants here to assist me. So the first proclamation, Councilmember Calhoun will read. It's for the Seward High 4x100 meter relay team state champions, and we might have some of those in the hallway. And could we get them to come in and stand up here so people can see them? There's one, there's another. Okay. If you just stand up here and look that way so all those people in TV land too can see you. While he reads. There you go.
Whereas the Seward High School 4x100 meter relay team is made up of Jarek Senecal, Ronan Bickling, Gideon Schrock, and Emerson Cross, running in that order. And whereas the Seward High School 4x100 meter relay team placed second at the 2023 state track meet and had a goal to take first during the 2024 season. And whereas during the regular season they broke the school record of 46 seconds that was held since 1999 by Draper, Schaefer, Tapsfield, and Lewis with a time of 45.89 seconds. And whereas on Saturday, May 18th, at the Region 3 meet in Homer, they placed first, winning the event by 1.5 seconds. And whereas on May 25th, 2024, at the ASAA state track meet at Diamond High School, they placed first in the state, beating their own school record with a time of 45.79. Now therefore, Sue McClure, the mayor of the city of Seward, Alaska, does hereby congratulate the Seward Seahawks men's 4x100 meter relay team and commend them for their Division II state track championship, dated this 8th day of July 2024.
And thank you very much. Thanks for running so well. And the second proclamation is for the Seward High School 100 meter dash state champion, which we have right here. And I'm going to ask the vice mayor to read that, please.
Whereas Ronan Bickling is a sprinter on the Seward High School track team, and whereas because he loves the sport, he trains year-round, and whereas on Saturday, May 18th, at the Region 3 meet in Homer, he placed first in the 100-meter dash with a personal best of 11.51 seconds, as well as placing first in the 200-meter dash, and whereas Ronan was awarded the Region 3 Male Athlete of the Year, and whereas at the Brian Young Invitational, he broke the Seward High School 100-meter dash record of 11.40 seconds that was set in 1997 by Forrest Johnson, with a time of 11.38 seconds, and whereas on May 25th, 2024, at the ASAA state track meet at Diamond High School, he placed first in the state with a winning time of 11.54 seconds. Now therefore, Sue McClure, mayor of the city of Seward, Alaska, does hereby congratulate Ronan Bickling for his Division II state track championship in the 100-meter dash, dated this 8th day of July, 2024, in the city of Seward.
I love those kind of proclamations. And is Mike Moore out there by any chance? He's not there. Well, I'm going to read this. Okay, I'm going to read this anyway. Whereas we celebrate and congratulate Michael Mike Moore, on his well-deserved retirement after dedicating over 37 and a half years of outstanding service to the City of Seward with significant contributions to the Public Works Department as the shop foreman. And whereas Mike Moore has devoted his career to serving the residents of Seward since 1984, he began working in the Public Works Department part-time as mechanic operator, and after 8 years he became a full-time employee in 1992. He advanced, taking on more responsibilities within this department, becoming the shop foreman. His longtime presence in the shop will be missed by his colleagues and the entire City of Seward. And whereas Mike has worked long hours as the shop foreman mechanic, handling vehicle repairs and maintenance for multiple city departments' vehicles and equipment, while also working early mornings and evenings for snowstorms, flash floods, rock slides. And whereas Mike has selflessly participated in the Seward Volunteer Ambulance Corps emergency services for over 40 years and volunteered during all hours of the day and night, he has responded to countless SVAC call-outs across the community with compassionate care for many local residents in need of an ambulance. And whereas Mike will retire from the City of Seward Public Works Department on June 28, 2024, and is looking forward to spending more time in this beautiful community, continuing his volunteer work with SVAC emergency services, as well as taking some much-needed vacations. Now, therefore, I, Sue McClure, Mayor of the City of Seward, express my heartfelt appreciation to Mike Moore for his numerous years of service, tireless dedication, and outstanding contributions to the City of Seward. I wish him all the best in his retirement, dated this 8th day of July, 2024. Let's applaud Mike. And Doug's accepting it for him, and you'll get that.
Yeah, and I'm not Mike Moore. Mike is, as you may have, if you've known him, he's not one to really come to a lot of functions and things.
Right.
But just the dedication he's had over all these years and the years of service with Public Works, but the SVAC, he's going to continue in that and continue doing what he's been doing and serving the community as he has for 40 years with them. So thank you for his word. I'll give it to him.
Thank you. Okay, we have the city manager report. You'll find it on page 8 of the packet, and Madam City Manager, Scott.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody for the safe, happy, and healthy 4th of July that happened this past weekend. It was a really awesome weekend all around, and I hope everybody enjoyed. I am still sore, not from the race, but from the firefighter challenge, which was significantly harder than the Mount Marathon race, in my opinion. So kudos to all of our firefighters. Some things I'd like to highlight in my CMR is the budget kickoff. We've started that internally, and so you'll be seeing a schedule coming to you soon as we look forward at FY 25 and 26. And we also recently got the grant station application on all of our city computers and the library computers. So anybody looking for federal or local grants can utilize that resource at our library. So we should have that up and running in the next week or two, and a really great opportunity for any local nonprofit organizations or individuals looking for grant opportunities both statewide and federally. So that's really an exciting program that we're starting up there. Other than that, I'll leave it to any questions.
Okay, are there any questions for the city manager? Councilmember Barnwell.
Yeah, I would just like to point out your patron statistics for the library. I have a little bit of problem with 552 people per day, visitors per day average, and I don't know how they're figuring out that kind. I've heard that that maybe the system needs to be looked at, because I think those statistics are important for us to have accurate information for making decisions on the library. If you could look into that, or if you have any comments.
Yeah, I would say that it might be an outdated system that we can look into. I do know that it is a people counter, so reassessing that as we kind of move forward, there's probably more updated software things that we can utilize so that we can see the number of people coming in and out. So I'll look into that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know I go in and out several times a day, so
yeah,
I might
that's
be
true.
one of those people. Any other questions for the city manager? Yes, go ahead.
Mayor,
Councilmember
thanks. Can you, so that everybody that doesn't have a packet can kind of get an idea of the update on the Jesse Lee home
thank
property
you.
for us?
I will pass that to Deputy City Manager Pickling.
Yeah, so the work with ADEC, the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, continues to kind of go on. I just think overall, like every time you've got to dig down, send those out the results, ADEC has to come up with like, is this acceptable or not? And so we're just in that continual process of digging down a little bit further. We're hoping to find the end of that sooner than later at this point. But we know that they're still finding some residual things, and so we will just wait for it to hear back, and hopefully, I think this summer is still a little bit late to see any development there, but hopefully by next summer we can have things rolling up there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, City Clerk report, you got something. You'll find this on page 17. You want to talk
Yes.
about it?
Thank you, Mayor McClure. The clerk report is just a quick summary of our clerk training that Jody and I both attended in June down in Tacoma. So Jody attended the first installment, and I was on the third installment.
You don't have to answer that right now, huh?
And it just features a couple of group photos with our sort of like unofficial graduating classes. So the folks in Jody's photo are going to be there next year and the year after that with her.
Did you want to say anything about it?
I enjoyed it. It was a lot of information, and I got to meet other deputy city clerks and clerks for their first new, year. So it was nice to learn everything I got to learn.
Good. Okay, thank you. And City Attorney report. Sam, are you on the phone? He's unmuting.
Hi,
Hi.
this is Sam. Can
Okay.
everybody hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, I will go ahead. This June was a little less focused maybe on some of the day-to-day advising. Seemed like a little bit lighter month, but the big issues that dominated our work were the trial with Mr. McDonald regarding the property on Nash Road, and then the RCA hearing that's ongoing. I'm not handling the RCA hearing, but I'll give you just kind of a brief update. There are three issues that impact Seward. Whether the commission will continue a separate margin for wholesale customers, what the margin will be for Seward, and how will costs be allocated among Chugach's customers. That's all kind of complicated, but the update is that Chugach has had 4 witnesses. The hearing or trial is about halfway done. Presently, Chugach is putting on its last witness, and Cody in our office just cross-examined that witness last week and was able to really pretty thoroughly cross-examine him, and the witness is one of Chugach's star witnesses, kind of principally responsible for justifying the rate increase, and it was a very successful cross-examination. That's, of course, still up to what the commission wants to do, but we're hoping that between him and then we put our expert, Dr. Larry Blank, is on hopefully early next week, I think. And so it's going reasonably well. It's anticipated to go through, I think, July 19th. And it's now on full days. It was kind of half days before. I believe all of this is televised. I haven't been able to log in, but if anybody on the council or the public is interested, I don't know if it's televised or at least you can log in. But I think we're expecting a decision in mid-September. And to the extent that there's anything that happens between now and then that's noteworthy, we will update the council. The other thing was the trial. Mr. McDonald was lacking permits for a campground and other violations of conditional use permits, and he had been in 2022 signed an agreement saying that he would no longer operate, and violated that agreement. So we brought suit in 2023. It finally went to a very short bench trial on the 28th, and what has come out since the time that I wrote this report is that we got an order in our favor. The judge took the testimony under advisement, asked for written closings, and then issued an order and awarded the city $24,700 in fines against Mr. McDonald and in favor of the city. So that was a favorable outcome. He could have given more in fines, but a judge is often going to be hesitant to go to the maximum amount of something like that, particularly when the property's been sold and the problem is essentially solved. But it was a very favorable result from my standpoint, and we still have the opportunity to move for attorney's fees in that case. So long saga came to a successful end. It could still be appealed or any number of things, but a win right now that looks reasonably sure to stay that way. We're hopeful. So if something like that were appealed, I think it's unlikely to be really reversed, but it would just be a delay and more costs. We're hopeful that doesn't happen. So with that, unless there are questions, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Are there questions for the attorney? It was a good report, and we will be having an executive session later on tonight. So. Okay, moving along, we have two reports. The first one is an update on the heat loop project, and I don't know who's giving it. It's Bruce. Okay. So this is a 10-minute shot.
As Chair of the Heat Loop, I'll just introduce our Vice Chair, Griffin Plush, and our reporter, Mary Tugas. We have a presentation that we'd like you to take a look at. I think it's a 7-minute presentation, and then we'd be available for questions and answers. This is part of our media outreach. It's part of one of the bullet points that the DOE grant emphasized the importance of spreading the information, so to speak.
It sounds elementary. You've got a body of water that never freezes next to a city that does. So drill a hole into the waterfront, run a line to town, and Bob's your uncle. Limited heat, right? While it may not take a genius to come up with the idea, executing it takes several. And today we'll meet a trio of geniuses working to make this idea a reality for Seward.
The city of Seward is an amazing place for a demonstration project because we have a small coastal city very much in need of lower cost heat energy. Right now, they have heating oil as their primary source. There's no natural gas. And so the community is very motivated to innovate new ways to heat their buildings and make use of nature. And in this case, we have this wonderful heat resource in the bay.
It's become known as the Heat Loop Project. Environmental engineer and Your Clean Energy founder, Andy Baker, got involved back in 2015.
The basic project is to heat 4 city buildings using a CO2 heat pump system that's drawing source heat from Resurrection Bay.
Baker designed a similar system for the Alaska Sea Life Center. That system pumped water directly from the sea. But no need for that in the heat loop, he says, because it will use a more advanced technology.
Rather than pumping seawater through a heat exchanger, we're going to be putting geothermal loops down in the deep gravel right next to the bay and exchanging heat with the tidal flush, bringing that heat into the library basement. We'll go into a CO2 heat pump system, and that heat pump system will lift the hydronic water to heat the library, the city annex, the city hall, and the fire hall, and inject heat just before the boilers do. This can be done at a lower cost and without the carbon footprint of burning oil.
Lower cost, yes, but with a hefty upfront price tag. Earlier estimates weighed in at $4.5 million, and inflation has driven that figure even higher. But in 2022, the city formed a volunteer community coalition. And with Baker's help, they were able to secure a design grant from the U.S. Department of Energy.
Final design will wrap up in September, and then we'll be competing with 11 other projects across the nation, geothermal projects, for phase 2 funding for construction.
But a number of milestones must still be reached before the September deadline. Last year, scientists from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL, visited Seward and dropped 300 feet of sensor equipment into a waterfront test well to collect the data that will inform the design.
The role of NREL is to do the measurements and then use the measurements to do a simulation model for the system.
Saqib Javed is the newest member of the NREL team to join the project and holds a PhD in energy and environment. Javed came to Seward on May 14th to retrieve data on the water's pressure, temperature, and salinity trends throughout the last season.
We are collecting experimental data which will be used as an input to simulate the results before we can actually go and build the system.
NREL environmental scientist Carlin Swearingen accompanied Javed to Seward for the data collection.
That'll help us determine how much the water and the ground temperature is influenced by the tides, but also by rainwater, snowmelt water, the fresh water that's going to sit on top of the salt water.
Swearingen was part of the team that originally installed the sensors last autumn.
The sensors were placed down well at the beginning of November. I remembered because I was like, oh, there was leftover Halloween candy everywhere.
The measurements will end in October, and the objective of this data is to get accurate temperature profiles for all months of the year to be used for modeling purposes.
The NREL team had installed temperature sensors in each of the targeted buildings during a previous visit, and these sensors were also retrieved as part of this season's data collection.
On the buildings, we did energy data collection and analysis, fuel use, electricity use, what types of internal heat gains or heat loads there are in the building. And then we also did blower door tests to check the air leakage through the building envelope. And then we used known energy usage to calibrate our models of the buildings.
The pair were joined on May 15th by Andy Baker. Included in Baker's latest plan is a system to melt the snow on the sidewalks around the targeted buildings.
We will be using this same heat pump heat to melt the snow on the sidewalk around the library and along the front of City Hall.
We would be modeling the snow melt system as design options. There is still a lot of work to be done in this model.
So we'll call the heat loop committee for May 15th meeting to order.
At the May 15th meeting of the Community Coalition, plans were discussed to incorporate the new elements into the overall design. Moose Pass resident Bruce Jaffa chairs the coalition.
If you can incorporate the photovoltaic, the solar or sidewalk heating, or the building system, this is the time to do it.
The outdoor snow melt, which I feel is imperative for this project because it will give us this low temperature load that we badly need for those heat pumps. There's not money in the original scope for those.
While not included in the Department of Energy grant, the project has already received a number of secondary funding awards. A $750,000 State Department of Energy grant will go toward the city's 10% matching share of the federal grant. And more recently, the project received a second federal grant in the amount of $500,000, thanks in part to the efforts of U.S. Representative Mary Peltola.
You know, we have an additional federal grant. It cannot be used as a match towards the scope that we have. But I'm going to openly suggest that you consider using that grant to help pay for the sidewalk snow melt system. That will supplement the project in the most beneficial way that I can think of.
All design phase requirements must be submitted by August 31st in order for the city to compete for federal deployment funds.
I think Seward has a very good chance because so many people use the library and the fire hall and the annex and the city hall. So unlike a private developed project that may just benefit those people who may live there, this benefits the entire area of Seward.
An analysis of the NREL data is expected within the coming weeks, then a final sprint to the September deadline.
The next step is to get that final design expressed into drawings, specifications, and cost estimate. That will go into the grant application package for the Phase 2 competition for construction.
Okay. I think there were some pictures that had went with that. I'm not sure that they played, but the content was presented. That was Sam McDavid, the voice. He is a very great voice, speaking voice, and the other players. I'd like to, direct any questions that you may have to our board. We actually are in, you have a laydown that I presented to you, and what it gives is a milestone for some of the things that we have to do. We're in Phase 1 of this grant, which is essentially the design and justification and the collection of data. Everyone that we talk to in the Department of Energy is tremendously excited by this. And what we learned in negotiations of Phase 1 is there is room to modify budgets as you work towards a contract with DOE, the presentation of meaningful and justified changes, i.e. Sidewalk heating, are in the ballpark, are in the game plan. So we believe that if we put forward a 45-minute, that's what we get, 45 minutes and then 15 minutes of Q&A, and we do it in a smooth way, we have a really great chance of gaining not just acceptance for the Phase 2, which was the initial grant, but an additional amount of money to include sidewalk heating. The reason for sidewalk heating is it increases the efficiency of the project by maybe 1% or a percent, a coefficient of efficiency. 3 to 1 is great. 1 unit of electricity, 3 units of heat. If we can put the sidewalk heating in there, because of the difference between the outgo and the return, the delta T, we're actually capitalizing on that input, or actually the giving up of heat. We can explain it a little bit better if you like, but Mary Griffin have been very much involved in research and coordinating this. Griffin, it comes all the way from Juneau to help us.
Yeah, I don't know if we're at time or what, but I'll just say I'm happy to be here. I'm from Seward. I grew up here with the high school. I know many of you. Councilmember Barnwell was my 6th grade teacher, and I'm just really excited to see this work advancing. I met Andy when I was in high school, actually, and the engineer for the project, and talked to him about this. And I think through the years, Seward, I think, punches above its weight in terms of its influence in the state and in the world, right? Like, people know Seward. People come to Alaska, they come to Seward. And I think there's a real opportunity with this project, when we talk about demonstration project, what does that mean and why is that something that we should do? I think we can model, really innovative technology and benefit in terms of cost and that with this project. And so I wholeheartedly support this project, and it's part of the reason as well as Javante Namugatia, another young member of our group. It's part of the reason why we're here to support this project, because we want to see our hometown really lead the way in this. So.
Griffin has really been able to access potential other grants that we look at. We expect that by the time this is done, every project generally swells in cost, that we're going to need some additional funding. We'll come pretty darn close. But I don't think we want to make the mistake that was made when the library was built, which was cut corners at the end and just kick the can down the road, which you're facing and mechanical repairs there now. So finding more grant opportunities is something that Griffin has really been able to expose us to. It takes work.
Oh, I'm just looking at the clock here,
Yeah,
so.
I'm sorry. And of course, we wouldn't be anywhere without Mary Tugas. So, Mary, could you just briefly, or?
I think we've got our 10 minutes. Can we just ask questions?
Well, it wasn't really a presentation, Mayor, and we didn't really understand how our report would be structured. Almost considered this to be a committee report, which would be somewhat without time limits, but that's fine.
We're ready for questions, Bruce.
Okay, yeah.
Anybody have questions?
Thank you, Mary. Are there questions? Yes, Vice Mayor.
I just wanted to know, so it was mentioned the project design is due by, because there's the deadline for this grant to be applied, or the design to be submitted, and then you have data that you're analyzing to make the design. How is this going to work out? Are those both this year? And so we're talking about data that hasn't been analyzed yet to be analyzed now or soon?
It's being analyzed right now.
Right now.
And it has been given to Andy Baker. And they also have been using it for modeling to make sure, as they said in the presentation, that we know how many, how much heat they can get out of each well and all of that. And then it's gonna, a lot of that was done previously, but DOE demanded that it all be done again, and to actually make sure that the project can do what the design and everybody is saying it can do.
Okay.
Part of the idea of this program being to support these sort of demonstration projects is that they have really clear, that NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which is a partner on this grant, that they have really clear data and sort of understanding of our project. So that's why as part of it, there's that data aspect. But the design is largely there, from what I understand.
And to be clear, the original design was pretty specific, but it was somewhat a guess. This definitive look at it, everything we've seen is supportive. At the most, it would require an additional unit being put in the basement of the library, or 1 or 2 additional wells. That would be the worst case situation. But the temperature of the water was originally only going to be looked at for 6 months through the winter. They're looking at it for a full year. Yeah. So we should have all that the information is in the hands of our design engineer. The phase 1 project, to answer your question, council member, is the phase 1 requires the complete design, shovel-ready project, if you will, be submitted for phase 2 consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barnwell?
Yeah, couple of questions. One, in the presentation on the audio there, it sounds like the heating systems in the buildings are not going to be, they're still going to be intact, but the water will be preheated. Is that basically so it'll save money on that end, but the heating systems will remain the same in each building?
The current heating systems hopefully will be a backup.
Oh, okay.
And that the entire heat load will be taken by this project. There's a high temperature system, the baseboard heater are high temperature, and a low temperature system which is in the library. There's a method to supply heat to both of those. And I believe that the electric boiler at the library, which has given problem, which will be maintained as a backup.
And then how many wells are we looking at right now?
Currently it's 20 wells, were originally intended to be close to 300 feet deep with water extracted down to 280, but the data tends to say that the zone of water that we're looking at is actually slightly shallower. So these 20 wells may be less than the original 300 foot intended, which is a money saver. But again, it may require an extra well or two.
So, sorry, this is the last question. So this model, could it be used, I mean, it sounds like what Griffin was saying, that this model might be able to be used in coastal Alaska or around the nation?
Yeah, all around, I mean, around the world. So last summer, thanks to Bruce and Mary, I was able to attend there's a big heat pump conference, fun fact, natural refrigerants conference out in Washington, D.C. And I also met with the delegation to advocate for this project and just let them know about it. But I met some folks there from coastal European down Seward. Like, we're looking at this exact sort of design right now. I think that ground source heat pumps have been in use, to be clear, like for a long time in Alaska and coastal Alaska. Too, at Juneau, where I live now, many of the public buildings, the airport, if you've ever flown in or through the Juneau airport, it's a ground source heat pump. So very similar to this system, but the idea of sort of having this ocean source angle to it, and just the design too, in terms of the type of refrigerant used, CO2. These are two ways that this is a relatively innovative, and a district heating system is something that is I think very exciting. We take advantage of this unique resource of the bay that we have here, having that sort of ocean source, ground source heat pump system. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Any last questions before we move on? Okay, thank you very much. Our second report, chamber report with Sam Allen. And we have a paper here.
Does everybody have one? I have an extra if anyone needs one. No? Okay. Hi, everybody. I hope you're feeling a little more recuperated from last week than I am. What a doozy. That was super fun. It was awesome. We had a great time. Everybody stayed safe. And I'm going to tell you all about it. So we celebrated the 4th of July Festival and 96th running of the Mount Marathon race last week, July 2nd through the 4th. We welcomed over thousands of spectators, runners, festival goers, and cruise ship passengers. It was not only a record-breaking week for the racers, but from a few businesses as well. Had their biggest days in history last week, so a lot to attribute that for. Thanks to the favorable conditions, a whole host of Mount Marathon race course records were set this year, and there were no major injuries to the 870 official finishers, so that was big thumbs up, and the hometown pride of this race remained strong. Alaskans continued to dominate the leaderboards, and the new permanent logo that you might have seen flying this year was designed by Moose Pass native Sarah Glasser, so great to keep that hometown feel with an homage and a nod to some Seward history in that logo. The Mount Marathon race did adopt a new non-binary race category this year, following the example set by many leading national races. And also, spectators were able to enjoy the Mount Marathon race from the comforts of their own homes with the live stream broadcasting made possible by the Hillcorp sponsorship, but that didn't stop them from coming to Seward, obviously. So, the success of these long-loved events are attributed to over 300 volunteers and dozens of local entities and lots of City of Seward departments. So thank you to everybody that participated and your efforts in creating such a effective and wonderful 3 days. There are so many people to say thank you to. Of course, I'm going to miss everybody, but I want to send out 2 big shout outs to Karen Hoover McLaughlin, our events and sponsorship coordinator, who, although has graduated to the City of Seward at the library, is finishing out 2 big projects for us this summer. So thank you, Karen, and also to Matthias Sari, our race director. And finally, we're always looking to improve festival and race day operations, and constructive feedback is always welcomed. We want to keep it safe and fun for everybody, so happy to field any of that at any time. Set a meeting with me, send me an email. Let's do this right. And I did include some Mount Marathon race results on there for you, and 2 I just want to point out. We've got a couple proud parents in the crowd. Olive Jordan, 14, set the junior girls race. Seward girl, we're super proud of her. And then also David Norris broke his own record from 2016 from Colorado, but born in Fairbanks. The new course record is 40:37. But John Osenga, I think you could probably get him next year. I think you probably could. So again, thank you to everybody that made that possible. Moving away from Mount Marathon and 4th of July, because even though it's over, it doesn't really feel like it's over. The Silver Salmon Derby is right around the corner. It's only 33 days away, so we're gearing up for that. Registration has been open. We've been able to reel in some anglers with early bird pricing. And I just want to remind everybody the ultimate mission of the Silver Salmon Derby is to promote fish restoration in Resurrection Bay. The proceeds from the Derby does go back into Cook Inlet Aquaculture Association to buy fish smolt that goes back into the bay. So it's a super important and sustainable derby. This year we're recognizing our charter businesses with a new local captain's award. We're celebrating our winners at an award ceremony at the Breeze Inn, and we're bringing back the Silver Salmon Ball, of course. So we hope you come dancing with us, and then also think about fishing with us during the derby, August 10th through the 18th. Even though it feels kind of far away, we are already looking into fall. The Seward Chamber of Commerce is participating in a number of travel trade shows this year. We'll be attending the TBEC Summit in Anchorage, which this is an educational conference for bloggers and content creators and Instagrammers, people creating online presences for destinations. We haven't really delved into this method of marketing yet, so we're really excited to get to be a part of this conference, which will happen in Anchorage in September. We'll also be attending the Alaska Travel Industry Association conference in Juneau in October, and I got the confirmation from Tony here that he's going to come to Pacific Marine Expo with us in Seattle in November. So some travel along the way. I made a point about economic development and community support. Did anybody make it out to the First Friday Art Walk last week? Did you make it by Tidewater Tap House and see all those awesome trash cans? There's a partnership between the Seward Chamber and Alaska Waste, and Seward Cares for Its Bears, a local collective who's interested in promoting safety of our Seward bears. And what we were able to do was to get bear-proof trash cans in the hands of really talented artists, and they got a gift card to buy supplies, and they decorated these bear-proof trash cans, and then they were on display at the Tidewater Tap House for the July 5th First Friday, and those cans will actually go downtown, so it'll really beautify Seward and send a really good message. So super proud of Allie, our communications coordinator, for coordinating all that. A couple other bullet points on there for you, but I also want to point out the Small Business Development Center Q2 report I've attached for you, and I believe Kellyanne might have a presentation next week, so I won't steal her thunder, but I will brag on her behalf. That this quarter, Kellyanne logged 8 new business starts, which is the most ever in a quarter for Seward. And in her capital infusion category, she continues to lead all of the Alaska Small Business Development Advisors this year with $8.2 million in loans, grants, and investments, despite being in one of the smallest communities. So Kellyanne is a rock star. We all know that. Good job. Thank you, City of Seward, for helping us make that partnership possible. Your dollars are well spent there. Moving on, I've included some clickable links in your packet for some MMR press, Mount Marathon in the Press. And then finally, Kat made mention of the City of Seward's budgeting cycle coming up and conversations starting. We're excited to be participatory in that. I've attached a report of Fed tax collection from the Finance Department. And you can see that since 2011 and before, the City of Seward has seen growth year over year in that collection. And with the Seward Chamber of Commerce being your sole destination marketing organization since 1995, it's important to note that the city's investment in a DMO has had a huge effect on this growth. I'd like to thank you for your partnership with us and encourage you to reinvest in your chamber during the budgeting cycles. So that's my report for tonight, and I'm happy to hang around for 2 more minutes and answer any more questions you got.
Questions? Yeah, Councilmember Wells.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When will you have analytics for the Mount Marathon race?
It takes about a month for all of that to process, and we're really excited to look at that, to see how the numbers.
And will you be given that information in your next presentation? Because I'm excited about it too.
Yeah, I can provide that.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's going to be a big influx, yeah.
Questions? Yeah, Councilmember Lynch.
Out of the 715 business licenses in Seward, how many businesses does the chamber promote?
Roughly within our membership is about 400 organizations, but that does include nonprofits and it does include destination marketing organizations throughout the state. So that probably makes up 15 to 20% of our organizations. Okay. But they're also not all Seward businesses that are within our membership.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you.
Okay,
Good
thank you.
report.
Yeah.
Thanks for the sticker.
You're welcome.
Okay, does anyone need a break before we continue?
Yes. I can take a break.
Oh, okay. Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 8 o'clock.
David Norris.
Okay, we are back on the air and ready when you are.
Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. It's kind of like herding cats tonight. Next up on our agenda is a public hearing. And it's on Resolution 2024-039. Mr. Clerk, when you're ready, could you please read that to us?
Resolution 2024-039, approving a lease assignment of lease 2000-02 from the estate of James T. Pruitt, successor in interest to James T. Pruitt, to Harbor Gateway and Alaska Domestic Corporation.
Okay, thank you. And this is on page 82 of the packet. I need a motion to approve and a second, please.
I'll move for the approval of Resolution 2024-039.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. And administration, I have a feeling I know who's going to be speaking to it, but Madam...
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe Harbor Master Tony is chomping at the bit to introduce this one.
Yes, Tony, go ahead. Tell us about
I thought you were going to make that easy on me here. I had a little snippet there, but you read it off really well there, Chris. I'll just leave it with questions that you may have regarding this lease assignment from James Pruitt to his heirs.
We'll hold the questions until after the public hearing, if that's all right. Is there anything else we need to hear before?
No, anything else you'd like to add?
Okay. Stick around, just in case. I'll open the public hearing on Resolution 2024-039. Mr. Clerk, has anyone signed in?
Nobody has signed in to speak.
Okay, is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak to this? Okay, seeing none. I'll close the public hearing. That's why I was suggesting you sit there, because I didn't see anyone. And now, do we have questions for the harbor master on this, or administration? It seems pretty straightforward. Are we ready to vote? Mr. Clerk, we're ready to vote.
Voting on the approval of Resolution 2024-039, Barnwell,
Yes.
Wells,
Yes.
Finch,
Yes.
Osenga,
Yes.
Calhoun,
Yes.
Kreitz,
Yes.
and Mayor McClure.
Yes.
Okay, that resolution has been approved.
Okay, and thank you for stepping up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Next, in unfinished business, we have ordinance 2024-009, which we brought on board at the last meeting and postponed it. So we're basically picking up our discussion where we left off. Do you want to read the title in just so people know what we're talking about, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Ordinance 2024-009, amending Seward City Code 15.10.226, land uses allowed table, prohibiting cluster subdivisions in all zoning districts. And this ordinance already had a public hearing on June 10th, 2024, and was postponed until tonight, July 8th, 2024, and we're going to resume right where we left off, which was at your council discussion.
Okay, and this is on page 139 of the packet. And we do have people from the Planning and Zoning Department here for questions, if we have questions. Or would you like to say something before we begin?
No, we have no additional comments if you want to hop into the discussion, and if there's
Okay,
questions
and then
that
if we
Courtney
have
can respond to.
questions-
Mhm.
All right, so we just sort of left it off with Councilmember Finch suggesting postponement so we could think it through more and such things. So now we're all here, and what you got to say? Councilmember Wells.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As much as I appreciate administration and planning and zoning looking out for the best interest of our community, I cannot figure out why we need to create another ordinance, another code, another rule, another law that would limit possible housing construction. And the examples and the reasoning that I was given was there's nowhere that anybody can build there's no piece of property where anybody can build a cluster subdivision. And my response to that was, well, then why do we need to make it a law? Why do we need to make it an ordinance that nobody can if there's nowhere where anybody can do it? It seems to me like we're just passing ordinances just to write ordinances. And the other reason that I was given was because that's the way lot sizes have been in the past, and we want to make sure they can't ever be changed. Well, we're in a housing shortage, and if a developer wants to come in and buy a bunch of properties and subdivide it and build a cluster subdivision, I, for the life of me, can't figure out why we would be opposed to that. And I haven't gotten a good, solid response.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we could ask some questions about that. Councilmember Finch.
There's a lot of people that don't want to raise big families and they want a nice small house. Why are we, I mean, we're limited on land space. So we got to maximize our housing. This works in Anchorage, it works in Kenai, they're flat land. We got mountains all the way around us. Why are we making an ordinance to limit the growth of people? Our number one problem, we can always get jobs in Seward and we lose them because of housing. Every time. We lose staff from the prison, the city, because of housing. Why are we bringing this to, I mean, that's what Anchorage did, let them do it. But let's not limit our housing sizes here. There are young couples that don't want kids, they just want a nice little house and a 3,000 square foot lot. Let's give that opportunity, because it'll be a lot cheaper than a 12,000 square foot lot.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
So I guess I wouldn't mind it if planning and zoning would come up here and give us some definitions, because I have a sneaking hunch, my understanding is that there's already minimum lot size for houses being built in our city as it is. And what this is somebody who's taking one parcel and dividing it up and trying to put a certain amount of housing in one parcel after dividing it up, and then finding out that some of it isn't available for that use, and then they try to make the same amount of housing fit in a smaller a parcel that's left of what they can use. So I guess I'm a little confused as to what the difference is, and that's...
Yeah, so I'll invite the city planner, Courtney, to come up and speak to that a little bit about the clarification between overall density of a cluster subdivision.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I included as a laydown to this packet a graphic that hopefully will provide a little bit of a better explanation by having that image. So with a cluster subdivision, you aren't creating more lots than what would already fit on a parcel of land. So if, I don't know if you have this laid down in front of the graphic. So there's an example, the example that this shows is a 10-acre parcel that could fit 30 lots. And so in a cluster subdivision, the example on the right, you're still only getting 30 lots, just smaller lots. And so, you know, a cluster subdivision primarily is comprised of single-family dwellings. It's different than the townhouse lots. So in your packet on page 65, you'll see the Hilltop subdivision, and that shows a portion of the subdivision that has townhouse lots that are very narrow. They were 30 feet wide by 100 feet, I believe. And so the townhouse lots are different than a cluster subdivision, and there's already things in our code that allows that. Cluster subdivision is different than what would be used to create multifamily dwellings like a 12-plex or like an apartment complex. So the primary question that the commission was considering in this recommendation to prohibit cluster subdivisions was just this question of how small do we want lots to be in Seward. So currently city code does allow 3,000 square foot lots south of Phoenix Road and then 6,000 square foot lots north of Phoenix Road. But the commission feels strongly that the city should not allow lots smaller than this in Seward. The commission receives complaints regularly about neighborhoods with lots that are 7,000 square feet not being big enough for snow, vehicle parking, and storage of boats and RVs. So this is the primary concern that the commission has, that the public is voicing, 7,000 square foot lots aren't big enough for a single family home. So they don't want to, they feel that this isn't an appropriate tool to allow in Seward. And cluster subdivisions are an amazing tool for planners and developers, but when applied to Seward, the challenges outweigh the benefits. And as the other two images that I provided show a map of the portion of Seward south of Phoenix Road, which there are, as Councilmember Wells pointed out, there's 0 properties south of Phoenix Road that would qualify for a cluster subdivision. But north of Phoenix Road, there are about 8 properties that could qualify for a cluster subdivision. Those properties, if approved for a cluster subdivision, would still need to meet maximum lot coverage requirements and then the setbacks, which all of those constraints do make it difficult, which, to your point, then why prohibit it? And really, that is, a good question, because whether you allow us to go through and code or not, it really would be difficult for a cluster subdivision to ever be approved or implemented. And the reason the commission wants to prohibit is to show this doesn't work in Seward, it doesn't fit in Seward, and the option that they want developers to look towards, rather than cluster subdivisions, which just look at the lot size, is to look at planned unit developments, which a planned unit development is allowed in R1, R2, R3, auto commercial, central business, and resource management. So that takes in a lot more of the land in Seward that is limited either by mountains or over a Nash Road, limited by utility expansion. So the planned unit development is really what the commission would like developers to focus on if they are developing lots that need special considerations.
Okay.
In your example here, could you explain on the right-hand side the minimum open space common element, 15% of the total tract? It's like empty space?
This is just like an example from other codes, but if our code doesn't have a lot of requirements around cluster subdivisions, so if someone came to the commission with a conditional use permit application, that is a requirement that the commission could impose on the developer, is that they would need to have a minimum % of that property devoted to open space.
Okay, but they could use that space to build housing into, if they're permitted.
That open space? Mm-hmm. Well, if it would depend on what the commission required of them. Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Calhoun.
Yeah. Isn't, and I could be wrong, I apologize, but isn't the kind of the definition of a cluster subdivision, as you stated, it's the same amount of lots in an area, but it's used to designate a green space or an open space for the use of those. When I looked up cluster subdivisions, the vast majority that I found were flatland, warm climate, no snow removal requirements, things like that. And they were, it almost looked like just simply townhomes with not much space, not much yard, but you had a common green space. And that's kind of the cluster subdivision that I've got going. When I look at your example here, to me, the one on the right isn't really a cluster subdivision because you've got a lot size of 7,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. So that's not really a cluster subdivision development by what a cluster subdivision actually is. And so I don't know that Seward is a place for cluster subdivisions, but I think that people need to understand that a cluster subdivision, you're going to look at taking a 3,000 square foot lot size, if we had that available south of Phoenix Road, which changes little things. We just renamed that whole loop up there. And making it a 2,000 square foot lot size, and then green space. And so, we need to kind of understand what a real cluster subdivision is. And it's not a subdivision that has 7,000 square foot lots, because if you want that, then we have a cluster subdivision up door away. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I hear so many people talk about what a mess that is in the wintertime, and the road up there, obviously part of the reason is it wasn't wide enough. It's not as wide as it's supposed to be, so it jams things up more, but, and then I understand too that when you get into cul-de-sacs, it just makes things a lot more difficult because of the lot shapes. So, yeah, I just think we need to understand what cluster subdivisions really are.
Okay, Councilmember Wells and then Vice Mayor.
In a response to Councilmember Calhoun, and I appreciate everything you just said there. In doing research on cluster subdivisions, I did find many in cold water climates, such as Colorado, Utah, so Aspen and Park, whatever that ski resort is there in Utah that I can't, Park City, thank you. And usually in a cluster subdivision, there's an HOA. And that HOA is what covers the issues with snow removal. It's what covers the issues with tight living quarters. And again, you had said that the cons were that we had community concerns, people complaining about 7,000 square sizes, nowhere to store a boat, nowhere to put your toys type of thing. But my point is that with the current inflation, the current cost of homes, and the current lack of housing, most families can't afford a boat. Most families can't afford all those extra toys. And if they want to come here to work, they just need every house doesn't have to be built for a family. Every house just has to have a roof and a person who can live in it and work and participate in our community. It doesn't mean every single house is going to raise a family. And the cons, I heard you say that the cons outweighed the pros, but I haven't heard any of the cons yet, other than snow removal. So I'm asking again, what are the cons to a cluster subdivision? Please.
Were you directing that to?
I'm directing it to Courtney.
Okay.
Yeah, because she's the one who said pros and cons, and so what are these cons that are outweighing the pros?
So another con is that, in fact, a cluster subdivision could actually minimize the amount of housing that could be provided in Seward by if the lot sizes are reduced to such that they are less than 6,000 square feet in R2 or less than 9,000 square feet in R3, then you're putting a single-family home in an area where you could put an apartment, a fourplex, a sixplex, an eightplex, and those are even more affordable options than a single-family home for individuals who are coming here. And to that point too, townhouses are even more affordable than single-family homes on a 3,000 square foot lot. And townhouses, our code allows for 12-foot wide lots for townhouses. So if we're really wanting to promote a housing solution option, I think we should be promoting townhouses, really.
One follow-up, please.
Okay,
Please.
one, and then
One
there's
follow-up
three
and then I'm
people
all
waiting.
done.
Okay.
One and then I'm all done. What we are trying to do here is dictate what developer comes to our community and what they develop. Because by saying, if we want to decide that, then the city should start buying properties and building properties. The fact is that it's a free market. We have properties that are for sale, and if a developer wants to build the property, and if they want to build a cluster subdivision or they want to build townhomes, that is their investment. And if somebody wants to buy that, that's fair market value, and somebody can buy that. And if somebody wants to buy it and tear it down and build townhomes, then they can do that too. But I still can't figure out why the city wants to dictate that.
Okay, Vice Mayor had his hand up, and then Barnwell, and then Finch, okay?
Okay. I just wanted to thank Councilmember Calhoun for bringing up Doorway. I happen to live on Doorway. The cons, and I don't know if I can say this enough, is that snow is a problem. I have basically a driveway that can take 2 cars, 3 if we squeeze them in, and when snow removal isn't being done, in other words, they'll pack the snow on the side of the road up in front of my house. But if it's not being done, then my driveway becomes a 1-lane driveway because of the snow pile getting so big and reaching heights that I can't park. 3 cars in my driveway any longer. So snow removal in the wintertime is a problem. The other con is that if you look at all these houses on this little design here, there is no access to your backyard. You have no access. Now, agreed, we're talking about families that might not be able to have a boat. We're talking about families that might not have a motorhome. But we're also talking about trying to make it so that people of today can purchase these homes, and that's what the premise is. But that's the people of tomorrow. You know, in 20 years, it might be something different. There might be somebody else that comes in. There might be a whole different group of people that want to move here, and they will have the same problems that I'm basically having in my house. I live with it. I mean, I adapt, and I bought the lot, and I like it. But there are cons. It is not the easiest place to live.
Councilmember Barnwell.
To your question, Councilmember Wells, I lived in a city in South America for 3 years, and there was no zoning and planning, and it was insane. There would be all kinds of stuff. Next door there would be a slum next to a major apartment building. There's just no rhyme or reason to anything, and it was chaos. And so I'm a huge believer in zoning, in thorough, thoughtful, and I would defer to our planning and zoning department. I think they're very thoughtful, and they're thinking through this. We're not the only ones that are thinking at low-income housing. These guys are thinking about it daily, every day, and I think we're second-guessing what they've already put a lot of thought into, and I feel it's a little presumptuous of us to try to outthink them on this one. I think they're really working hard to alleviate the problems of housing. And then finally, I don't think lot size dictates affordability anymore. It's building. It's how much it costs to build. And the townhouse options or the apartment buildings are probably the most efficient way to build. And if we're jeopardizing those by putting in cluster housing provision that might allow someone to bypass the laws to throw a house into a bigger lot. Is that right, Courtney? Did I say that right? In any ways, that cluster might mess up the system that's already pretty thought through and carefully vetted over the years. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Councilmember Finch.
Lot size does have a big factor in cost of purchasing houses these days in Seward at the prices that the borough's charging. But like the townhouses up the valley where I live, they have a HMO that comes in and they hire Metco to come in and do the snow removal. You know, I just don't think we need to take this option off the tape. You know, we don't need to pass this. If we're gonna get a contractor coming and wants to build it, it's more housing, which will keep more people. We're losing people constantly because of housing. It isn't the jobs. We keep getting jobs. We lose jobs because of our #1 thing is housing. You know, South America is a lot different than the U.S. I've been to the Philippines. I've seen the same thing. But we have rules and regs here where they don't. You know.
Thank you. Anyone else that hasn't spoken? Okay. Well, we've heard various opinions. I can decide with Councilmember Barnwell on what he said. Also, a question: if a person did come and try to do such a thing, I was told that you could get a CUP to potentially override the prohibition. Is this true?
So if an individual came in and needed to build a subdivision that required smaller lots, or they wanted to request smaller lots, then they could go the planned unit development route. If they specifically wanted a cluster subdivision, then we would need to add that to the land uses allowed table again.
We would have to go through the process again. But by passing this ordinance, it doesn't forevermore prohibit cluster subdivisions then. It just takes it off the possibilities unless someone delved into it to get the special permit and then would bring it back, correct?
Right.
Okay. And my other question is there anyone wanting to do a cluster subdivision? Have you been approached by anyone?
No.
Developers or anything? Okay, so there's that. Councilmember Calhoun.
And I apologize, I probably could have looked this up myself, but in our code, what we're being asked is whether we want to prohibit cluster subdivisions. Is there already a cluster subdivision portion of our code? Is it in there now?
No, so the process that it would follow would just be the process for a conditional use permit. And so the conditions would be created by the commission at the time an application would be submitted.
Okay, so the commission could deny it.
Correct.
So we already have a prohibition possibility.
Right.
Which further muddies the decision-making process. Okay, a couple more, yeah, go ahead, Doug.
So correct me if I'm wrong, if we pass this, then a developer would have more red tape to go through to get this done, to provide more housing and sewer.
I wouldn't call it red tape, it would just be, they would need to find another option, whether planned unit development or townhouse, or it's just prohibiting, like anything in code, when you prohibit, then you look for another option.
Vice Mayor.
Can I just get a confirmation here? We're not talking about more housing than would be developed.
Yeah, I would also like to clarify that a cluster subdivision, you can't increase the number of lots on the property. You can only increase or decrease the size of the individual lots. So if you have a 20-acre lot that can fit 20 lot sizes by our rules, it would still just be 20 lots but smaller, to find a focal point like a river or a mountainside or a lake. So just to clarify that it's not expanding or contracting any amount of housing that our community would be able to add.
Thank you. Okay, are we anywhere near voting on this? Okay, could you, Mr. Clerk, just define for us what a yes vote means as opposed to a no vote at this point, because I think we need that.
So a yes vote would enact the ordinance and prohibit the cluster subdivision. And a no vote would do the opposite.
Right.
Does that help?
I mean, that, it seems backwards, so I think
Yeah,
everybody should.
I see what you mean. It's confusing because a yes vote is prohibiting something.
Right. And usually we have the other way around. Okay, we ready to vote? Okay, Mr. Clerk.
Okay, voting on the enactment of ordinance 2024-009. Kreitz.
Yes.
Calhoun.
Yes.
Finch.
Yes.
Osenga.
Yes.
Wells.
No.
Barnwell.
Yes.
And Mayor McClure.
Yes.
Okay, 6 in favor and 1 against. That ordinance has been enacted.
Okay, thank you. This is how the process works. So next we have Resolution 2024-035. Am I correct? I feel like I missed something. I'm correct, okay. Mr. Clerk, when you're ready, could you please read that?
Resolution 2024-035, authorizing the city manager to appropriate funds for increased premium costs of property, casualty, workers' compensation, and other general insurance paid to the Alaska Municipal League Joint Insurance Association for the period July 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024.
Okay, and you'll find this on page 152. I'd need a motion to approve and a second, please.
No, move for the approval of Resolution 2024-035.
A second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Administration.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As stated in the resolution, this is appropriating funds to cover the increased premium costs of our insurance with AMLJIA, and we have Brennan Hickok from AMLJIA here today to speak to any questions that you may have about that increase.
Okay, welcome, Brennan.
Thank you.
Did you want to say anything about this first, or just answer questions?
I mean, I have some notes. I'll just go through a little bit, just to talk about. So I met with the administration a few weeks ago, and there's just a number of things that are going on in the insurance world right now that I talked to them about, and then they said, well, why don't you just drag your butt down and talk to the council about it? So I said, that's cool. I like Seward. It's neat. So we'll start with just the historical aspect of the MLJ. Back in the late 80s, 1988, I believe, most public entities purchased their insurance through the private insurance market. And there's this famous Time magazine cover that says, "America, your insurance has been canceled," because private carriers decided that they were no longer going to provide coverage for public entities, or it was just going to be too expensive, and local municipalities couldn't afford it. So the Alaska State Legislature at that time enacted AS 2176, I believe, which allowed for basically pooling of funds amongst school districts, boroughs, and cities around the state. And so that's basically how we were established. And so the city of Seward was one of the founding members of the AMLJIA, so we appreciate that. And basically since the early 90s have been contributing to this big pool of funds that we use to help pay claims for workers' compensation, property, general liability, police professional liability, any of the insurance needs that you have. So in the last 2 or 3 years, 5 years-ish, we've experienced a very hard market in terms of property and workers' compensation, increased healthcare costs and general liability costs due to nuclear verdicts, some of the things that have been happening nationwide. And so we try to insulate ourselves from the rest of the world by taking on more risk, or what's called a self-insured retention. And so we do that on your behalf, and then we purchase reinsurance for those things that are above the capacity of risk that we can take on. So 97% of our costs are associated with claims. We pay an actuary every year to basically determine how much each member should be contributing to our pool. We have 156 members currently, and so we recognize that the cost of insurance has increased dramatically in the last number of years. So that's why I'm here today, to help answer some questions if you have any, because we basically told the membership to budget for about 25–30% increase in insurance costs this year, and the city of Seward came in at about 17%, so that's a testament to your guys' safety culture that you have here. You guys' claims are not very high, and so I've had to do this song and dance a number of times. 17 is a really good number. I've had to tell other municipalities that it's 40, and I get drilled pretty hard. So, like I said, 97% of our costs were nonprofit. They're associated with claims. So it's not like we're here to make any money off of the city of Seward. We just want to provide the coverage that you guys need just in case something happens. We have one competitor in the state, which is the Alaska Public Entity Insurance Company, and we're actually in the middle of a merger conversation with them because the purpose of pooling public funds is that we have, everybody in together. All the public entities around the state, they're help sharing risk, sharing costs, trying to insulate ourselves from the reinsurance market, which is a global market. So, if you see fires in Florida or California, if you see hurricanes in Florida, those things, we try to insulate ourselves from those costs in the marketplace. And by taking on greater risk, we're able to do that. But at some point, there is a financial kind of tipping point that we do have to purchase that reinsurance, and we are subject to some of the global catastrophes. So if you see, I think I mentioned nuclear verdicts is one of the things, if there's a police shooting where somebody gets, $47 million payout, that may be in Minnesota, but those insurance companies are the same insurance companies that we're purchasing insurance for on your behalf. So I think I read the resolution, the budget was just a little bit shy, about $61,000. And so yeah, that's basically why I'm here today, is just to answer any questions that you may have, why you may have, and you guys are on a calendar year budget, whereas most of our members are fiscal year budgets, and so this is probably just an amendment to that.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So you're much maligned by many cities at this point.
Yeah.
Questions for Brennan? Yeah, Councilmember Barlow.
Have you thought about doing an incentive program for good cities like us?
Yes. We actually have what's called the Loss Control Incentive Program. And you can save about 5% on your contribution costs, and it's basically just a bunch of boxes that you have to check. Your employees need to get trained on, safe lifting, some back prevention, ergonomics, those types of, workers' compensation costs. And then we ask that you inspect all your facilities every year, and then do some checklists like, have you prevented, certain hazards, as you unplug this, unplug that, whatever. Make sure your electrical boxes have access to them, that there's not clutter anywhere, and there's.
But you couldn't prorate a community that is 17 and say, okay, they're at 17, you guys are 40, so we're going to charge you guys a little more.
Yeah, so we use what's called an experience modifier. So we pay an actuary every year to look at the losses that each community has. And so they tell us, okay, here's how much you should be charging. And then they look at your loss history, and then there's a multiplier. And so the city of Seward's multiplier is less than 1. So you're actually, because of your guys' great loss experience, you're actually getting charged less than somebody like the city of Fairbanks. Shh, don't go.
That's good. Other questions? Councilmember Finch.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to ask the question I know I'm going to get asked, but has the city looked at other insurance companies to see if it's cheaper?
So currently there are 2 insurance companies in the state, and they are in the process of a merger. So while we did not go out to RFP this time around, the reality is that they're about the same price at each time. And in the future, it will be the same insurance company.
And if you were to go to a private insurance carrier, you're basically going to take everything that we do plus a margin of profit, right? So
I just know I'm going to get asked, that's why I wanted it out.
And then the other thing that's unique to the city of Seward, not super unique, but somewhat unique, is that APEI, they use a broker service, so you would have to pay a broker in order to participate in the program, and there's usually a 10% charge for that, so it's going to be cheaper for our services regardless.
Okay, so it sounds like we pretty much need to approve this. Yeah. Any other questions for Brandon? We appreciate what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're ready to vote. Okay, Mr. Clerk.
Voting on the approval of Resolution 2024-035. Calhoun?
Yes.
Barnwell?
Yes.
Wells?
Yes.
Kreitz?
Yes.
Finch?
Yes.
Osenga?
Yes.
And Mayor McClure?
Yes.
Okay, that resolution has been approved.
Okay, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brennan.
Okay, other new business. Number 1, to discuss the FLAP, Federal Land Access Program grant. And there's some information on page 162. And I believe what we're tasked with is, correct me if I'm wrong, administration, to come up with a recommendation to pursue one of 3 of the options. And
Yes.
you want to talk about that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll actually invite Public Works Director Doug Schessler up to speak as well. But we have applied for and received the FLAP grant and did preliminary work, and we're now at the point in the process where we need to choose a step forward to relay to our grantor what the next steps will be, and I'll let Doug dive into that a little bit more.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, Council, members of the public. We're working this out to get figured out. We've worked with Western Federal Lands, who's in charge of this grant, working through all the systems. They've done an analysis. What you have in front of you is a small portion of the final scoping report that they did. The scoping report basically came up with 3 options, which they need to they're under the gun now to decide, they need our decision on which option they want to go with, because the design and engineering is not the same to just do all of one and then hopefully move on to two. It's a little bit different that they have to go through. On page, I believe it's 163 in your packet, it lists at the bottom, it says option 1, general alignment. That's the first of the options that goes through. You have hydraulic and the report, the general field investigations, survey, right-of-way mapping, engineering analysis and design, and that's for a gravel road the same as it is, but with improvements with both drainage and some other issues on it. Option 2 is a paved roadway, and the extra widening, the different things that would go with that. Option 3 is a paved roadway with a pedestrian facility of some kind that they were trying to work in. So of the 3 options, what we're working on right now, we have, they've used out of the $2.5 million grant that's out there, we had the matching, so it's 2.3 and then matched our 200,000 into it that the city had to pay. To go through, we've basically looked at the options with them, trying to figure out what's the best way forward. If you look on page 165 of your packet, it lists the estimate. And on the estimate, it lists option 1, gives your preliminary engineering 1.48 plus the environmental mitigation of 250,000. So you're getting up toward the 2 million that is still left in the grant. They've used about 500,000 so far on engineering. It doesn't include construction, but they list construction out in the next column and the total. So they come up with the total to do option 1, and that's in today's dollars, $13,414,000. The next ones, they increase from there. I think as you look at the different options of how and what to do with these, I think the direction we need is, do we try to proceed with, do we want to try for a paved roadway with the pedestrian access? Or do we want a paved roadway? I mean, we all want what we want, it's just the cost is really what it gets to. So you're looking at the dollars. We have funding to do option 1. Option 2, if you look at the preliminary engineering, that's getting close to 500 or 5 million. We only have 2.5, so we'll have to try to come up with that, but we need that fairly quickly if we're going to do it. The idea was to get some design done the best we can for the most safe roadway that they can design, and then try to go for construction funds afterward. The idea is, have a ready project to go. If it's shovel ready and we're ready to go, it's much easier to get future funds from other entities via DOT, state, federal, those type of funds. And that's the direction that this FLAP grant had gone to when we applied, and the Low Point and Micah were very, very instrumental in getting the paperwork filled out, getting through it, and what we applied for was for design so we could move further. The one thing we have to look at, regardless of design, which one we pick, if we go to design, which option 1 seems to be, in my opinion, the one to probably go with, at least we get it designed, and then we can pursue funding to get up to 13 million. But trying to get the funding to finish it is the issue of how quickly could you get those extra funds to go to option 2 or option 3. If we don't get any future funds, let's say we do option 1, we get the design, get a good preliminary design, engineering, and environmental done with that, and we don't do any work after, we're not able to get funds or make it work, then the city is on the hook for that entire $2.3 million grant we got. We have to pay that back at that time. So there is some risk for us where we go. So I think we have to look at that. I think that was the intention in the grant. The other 2 possibilities, I think it's just how much do we want to try to go. I like it. I mean, to be able to have paved roadway, I mean, I don't know with the rocks and stuff breaking it up, but it's sure nice to drive on than beat up gravel every time it rains. So, you know, trying to get that to work somehow, it's just the cost of how to get there. There is, and Micah mentioned it up, that the one that's the least desirable is, it's a fourth option, but it's an option. And they said, we've already gone through and done all your unstable slopes, and which the big avalanche we had was not included in the unstable. They, you know, they did the best they can, mapping them all out, looking for unstable rock and everything else. That one has that fracture up behind that was hidden. It could happen anywhere down about the first half of the road. That could still happen again, regardless of what we do. So the other option is that we proceed with those slopes and start using the rest of the money for construction. The disadvantage, we don't get any of this design that we actually applied for and tried to get. The advantage is we use that $2 million that's left till it runs out, and then we don't owe any money afterwards. So it's something that they kind of needed it by the end of June to say which way are we going. We got to tell us, and we pushed until this meeting, since the last meeting in June was canceled. But they really need to know as soon as they can. We need some direction from you guys to say we really like this option or that option.
Okay, I have a quick question, a couple of questions. Can you tell me how far out the city owns that road and what part of it is the borough? Because it's really hard to define, apparently.
There's about a quarter to a half mile at the far end that is in the borough. From, say, Storm Chasers this way for, I believe it's a quarter mile to a half mile. I don't remember the exact dot where it's at. The rest is actually in city limits. It's not owned by the city, it's owned by the National Park Service. We have a right-of-way easement, they called it, that we signed back in '80s when we put the sewer plant out there. And with that easement, you know, we are able to then use it as an access road full on and maintain what we can out there.
The second question I have, if we were to go and pave it with our sewer lines going underneath, anything happened, we'd have to tear up the pavement, right? Correct?
Correct. I mean, sewer lines are normally in the alleys, in the gravel, but say there's not a water line out there, but there's electric in the road right beside the sewer. But I think, you know, something would have to happen. If it happened, it'd be a mess no matter what you did on it, whether it's electric or sewer.
Okay, I have one more, and then we'll, when they begin the construction of the new tunnel, how will that affect what's going on with, is there any thought to, you know, the road's going to be shut down, and can there be a coordination somehow maybe in the work that would be going on, whichever option, as the new tunnel is being built, or has there been any discussion?
These projects are completely separate from each other.
Well, yeah.
And the tunnel, the Army Corps of Engineers tunnel end of it, I wouldn't say shut down. We're trying to keep the road completely open as much as possible is the plan with the Corps. It'll be diverted and be kind of around. The idea is to keep ideally 2 lanes at all times, but there's some real issues there, especially if there's an event. We still have the same risks as far as slides and avalanches and maybe a big water at the tunnel coming out during the project.
So that's just another thing to throw in the mix. Councilmember Finch.
Yeah, so, see if I got this correct. Option 1, the earliest the construction could start is April 2027, and you got the money to start that. But is there time to...
So currently we have just the money for the estimated engineering fees.
Okay.
So we have about $2 million in grant funding that we can use to cover the first column in that cost spreadsheet.
So that's what I'm getting at is, the earliest the construction is April 2027. So between now and then, what's the likelihood of being able to, like you said, get more funding to cover at least option 1 or further?
I think the only way is when you pick an option and we proceed forward, then we know what we can ask and try to get funding. We'll be working that the whole time since. but we can't start construction until we get funding. So it's not like there's a clock running. That could be the earliest probably, somewhere in there. I know that depending on if this engineering is done this year, and let's say we got some sort of infrastructure grant for, whatever this 13, and there's a factor, I think it says it jumps up every year a little bit with the inflation, but let's say we got 15 or 20 million on some sort of grant to do it. Awesome. I think it would go out to bid fairly quick. You'd have to get the bidding documents out and go, but the big hurdle is the next step in funding, and they assured us at the time, and when I say they, this is the state, STIP, DOT, and folks here, and working with our legislature, and how can we move forward. They say, well, once you're shovel ready, you have the best chance. But we all see, where we're at. I mean, it is what it is. We can luck out, we could get something, we could be sitting here holding the engineering.
Follow-up?
So, if, let's say we do option 1, would we still be able to say, okay, we got option 1 in motion, can we add to option 2? Or we only have option 1, we're done?
Pretty much have to pick one, because the design and the different structure stuff, they have to do a little bit different, whether it's widening or adding different things.
Okay, other questions, Councilmember Barnwell?
So for the option 4, I assume that the community council at Low Point is not very excited about that, because they're not, you said they weren't going to use any of the existing data or reports that they've already used. I mean, basically, you're just going to try to upgrade the existing road as much as possible with the existing funds.
The option 4 would be to utilize the funds that are left to mitigate as many unstable slopes as possible and minimal roadway adds, just a little bit of widening here and there where they could. It's pretty minimal, but it's basically trying to make it safer by removing unstable areas that they've already identified.
And then, and then the option 1, is the road not designed very well? I mean, we did that. I know it's not designed very well, but does, for instance, is it crowned? Does it have ditches? I mean, what are the primary problems with that road as it exists now, other than obviously stability?
Yeah, well, I mean, the primary problem with the road is the mountain is above the road,
right.
and we're right on the edge.
We're not going to solve that.
And that's the hard one to solve. That's the primary, but then with that, with the road being the size it is, I mean, it's hard to get a ditch against the mountain because you narrow the road. You need to have some sort of drainage, and that's the biggest problem we have there is we also don't want to slope the road toward the water, especially for the winter time, is it just you get a slide off. So, there's some real constraints we have on how to maintain that, to go out, and there's a few areas that, yeah, we could hopefully maybe make some pockets, maybe get a culvert in, but we have to watch those areas too, as which ones are slide areas are a little wider, let's put a culvert, but then it's buried in snow.
So what's the advantage of going for option 1? Why not just do option 4? And if you're saying that really the slope stability is the biggest issue, and why not just go with option 4 and use the money we have to try to mitigate what we can with it?
I think the biggest difference in option 4, use the money and you don't owe you're done, but you don't get anything that you applied for hardly. You don't get, the idea was to apply to get the design and engineering and environmental the best you could, to then move forward with a bigger project to try to find funds to do the bigger project. So the option 1 is going to consist a lot of design, but there's construction, as you see. Design is, it's relative to the size of the project on each of these options. So option 1, like it shows here, to do construction, the whole thing is 13 million, of which I think it includes obviously what we have in the 2.5, so we'd be short. We'd be looking for 10, 11 million to do option 1 and get the engineering all done. But I mean, again, you're engineering for option 1, which is, it's improvement, and it's helping some different things that they go through, and there definitely is more details in in the packet of what that all entails. But I think it's just, it's kind of a hard one where it's tight on money no matter what we look at everywhere and how to get there. We definitely would have to pursue more funds to do it. The advantage of option 4 is just that you're utilizing the money you have and not spending more. Do you get much more out of it? You do get some improvements. You get some of the bad rocks that they've identified, the worst slides. It'd be a worst first scenario and knock them down and go. But then as far as the city's amount of money, you're done. There's no repayment. There's no more liability for having to repay if we don't do it. So that's where that came from. It's just utilize those funds that are already there. You know, option 1 gives more toward what the FLAP grant was applied for.
And Doug, could I just clarify for 1 second, what is the deadline that we have to have something done on the road before we have to pay back that $2.5 million FLAP grant?
I believe it's a 10-year, and I believe it's from when we decide, and they start going on the full
So from
design here.
10 years tonight, probably.
So, Vice Mayor, was that?
That was my question, what the deadline was, so.
So we really need to make a decision, basically. Councilmember Wells.
I just want to clarify, so if we did go with option 1, or any of the other options, we would have 10 years to generate the rest of the funds?
To generate the funds and be substantially on our way. I think as long as we were working in it and we had things going, I don't think from what I'm hearing from them, that's what they want. They want to see some substantial completion within those 10 years.
Okay. So what we need to do is come up with the consensus of, Vice Mayor Osenka.
I'll just go ahead and say that even with 10 years, it would scare me to, I mean, maybe we could plan on paying back $2.5 million in 10 years and start a fund and putting money into it every year that when 10 years is up and maybe we're not. But then again, if we don't have progress and they decide we're not doing anything right, then it becomes due sooner. I'm a little nervous about getting ourselves locked into a position where we have to come up with 13 or 11, $10 million, $12 million quickly.
Councilmember Finch.
The way I'm looking at it is 10 years is a great thing because all it takes is that landslide could have had a family involved in it. And what would the city be paying out for that landslide that killed the family? If we can get this started on a 10-year funding, at least we're doing something to prevent. But I mean, everybody's driven that road. You know, something's got to be done with it. And the city's going to be liable if a family gets taken out on that landslide.
I have a question.
Yes, Councilmember.
I apologize if I missed part of this. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. So this, just to throw it out, is option 1. So I can get my question answered. Does that include the entire road all the way out the Lowell Point?
Basically, this project is from Storm Chasers to not quite the bridge, to the cannery.
So from here to Storm Chasers.
Okay. Yeah. So it's just covering the city's.
Just barely past.
Yeah, just past this, what's in the city limits. So we don't have an option of partnering on some of this with the borough or the state or DNR or anybody else that could maybe go, okay, you guys are doing this, maybe we can kick in, you know, some funding and help you out plus extend it out the rest of the way or something like that. Is that a possibility to have that? Because I personally, in a perfect world, having a paved road with a bike path and whatever would be awesome. I don't think $100 million is going to happen. So, you know, to me, option 1 is a reasonable way to go. But I think in addition to that, if we could maybe see about the borough partnering and DNR and everybody else, maybe it could happen, and if we had those partners, it would be easier for us to get that other funding that we need for our portion on there. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I would just like to add to that, or to clarify that choosing an option tonight starts the conversation about who we can reach out to for collaboration and grant opportunities and funding. We just need a direction to go into so that if the risk does happen, and if in 10 years we aren't in that process, we're not on the hook for $13 million, $33 million, or $100 million. So moving forward with a decision right now between option 1, 2, 3, or 4 just sets us up for the opportunity to start those conversations down the line, but also choosing option 1 accepts that risk that it does not come to fruition and we need to pay back that $2.5 million, which does exist. So we can spend the next 8 to 9 years diligently working on all of our federal lobbyists and assembly representatives and partners across the state, but there is a small reality where we get to the end of that timeline and we have to pay the $2.5 million, which is why we're bringing it to you to kind of give us direction and see what risk levels you're comfortable with us taking.
Go ahead.
Maybe 10% of all the department heads' salary.
Yeah.
So
Did that answer your question as far as the?
It does, yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, it does.
Okay.
other questions? So we need to come up with a decision. So how do we feel about option 1? Oh, we've got hands. Okay.
Nope, that's my option 1.
Oh, option 1, option 1, option 1, option 1, option 1, option 1, option 1. We have a consensus.
Good.
Thank you for the
Anyone want to
direction.
change their consensus? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so we're giving you direction to proceed with option 1, planning, or however we want to do that.
Hopefully we're back sooner than 10 years from now to give you an update.
Okay, thank you very much. That was, are we okay to continue for a bit more? Okay. We need to discuss the flooding of the properties south of Dick Craft Road and proposed solutions. We'll find out on page 166. And who wants to talk about this?
I will bring up the Community Development Director, Danny Munich, to speak to that. That's your favorite.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. First, for historical context on this memorandum, so I was contacted by a Seward resident, Susie Urbach, who spoke earlier at the meeting about, in April, regarding annual flooding concerns she and her neighbors have been experiencing. I think she's lived there for 37 years and seems to have noticed a significant difference since the road was built in flooding in her property. And so she initially invited me to come out to her property. I told her I was not a floodplain expert and referred her to the Seward Bear Creek Flood Service area, but said I'd still be happy to come out and walk your property with you. And she said she'd been in touch with them and had also invited their program manager, Nick Chapman, to visit her property as well. So we both went out there. And after our site visit, I brought her concern to the Planning and Zoning Commission. We had an upcoming work session dedicated to the hazard mitigation plan update, so we felt that flooding concerns tied in well to that conversation. So we added to it as a topic and asked concerned citizens to attend as well to share their concerns. And so that occurred on May 21st. And by this time, Nick had gone to Susie's property to do some surveying and had come up with some recommendations that the individual landowners could do to help with the issue, as well as potential actions the city could take to help mitigate flooding in this neighborhood. So after a productive conversation and hearing more from concerned residents of that neighborhood, P&Z took this up as a discussion item at their June 4th meeting. And that was interesting. Part of that meeting was we had a conversation about what, if any, action the commission has the ability to take on this issue. And so we got into what the commission dealing with Title 15 and how that states that the intent of this title is to protect the public health and general welfare of the citizens of the community. And there's a specific section of Title 15 that discusses floodplain management and specifically methods of reducing flood losses. And so with that, the commission felt it was in their purview to forward this memorandum to council to consider recommending administration take action to help mitigate the flooding concerns of Forest Acres. And again, myself not being a floodplain expert, Nick Chapman was gracious enough with his time to attend tonight's city council meeting, and so he's here. If you'd like to talk to him further about his specific recommendations or questions, he's here and more than willing to address the council. And so I'll just finish by saying, those of us who are homeowners, especially in Seward as flooding areas, it's not just the flooding itself that's an issue, it's like the anxiety and worry, right? Of having to always wonder if that next 10-day forecast of torrential rain is gonna be the one that kind of causes an issue for us. And so, first and foremost, I just wanna thank you for taking this discussion item up to let our citizens know that their voice is being heard. And then speaking for our office and the commission, this was a cheap, easy fix that would have been done already. And so I think the commission is just hopeful that some sort of step forward is taken tonight, whether that's looking into the specific recommendations in the memorandum or looking into further potential actions that could help support the flooding issues in this community. In that specific neighborhood, I'm sure those residents would be super appreciative. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So can we hear from Flood Board?
Yeah, if Nick Chapman would like to come up and speak, and if you have any specific questions about those flood mitigation concerns.
So who was it that made the recommendation for the ditch and the drainage? Was that
That was my recommendation.
That was your recommendation, okay. Is that a reasonable, I mean, you have a reasonable expectation that this will alleviate the flooding?
I think it's a great first step. The ditch is overgrown. It hasn't been cleaned out since it was built, it looks like. The culverts at Diamond and Maple are unusable to pass water right now in their condition. So if we went through and we dug the ditch deeper than it was constructed, from where it drops off about 100 yards downhill up to the Maple cross culvert, then I think it would definitely help.
Do you have a cost estimate for something like that?
I don't. I don't think it would cost more than probably $20,000 or $30,000.
So could something like this, so, I mean, there's the flood board that we all pay into with our property taxes. So is there a potential for this to be a project for the flood board?
There's a potential for it, in my opinion. This is a city maintenance thing. The restoring of ditch lines to construction or the redesigning of them is kind of a gray area, but like I said, in my opinion, it's a maintenance thing. I will bring it to my board for a vote if they want to try and take it on as a project, if you'd like.
Okay, so other questions? Councilmember Finch.
I can't remember, but did the borough pay to put that road in originally? No. Okay.
Other questions? Yeah, Vice Mayor.
I was just going to ask, you have a picture here with the elevation, so I'm trying to decipher where it says it's closer to the property that are affected. It looks like, I guess I'm trying to just understand how this is working. It says 14.63 at 2615 Birch Street, and then down on Dick Craft Road it says 12.3, 12.7 as it's going toward the highway. So I'm assuming that, obviously that's lower than.
Yes.
So the elevation going toward the highway from that point, I mean, it would be going down, right?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
These measurements are in meters. I apologize, I didn't switch it over. I didn't know it was gonna make it this far.
I was just wondering.
But basically what this is showing you is that that it does go downhill on the road, but very gradually. So the last shot I took so from 1003 to 1007, there's there's a very small change in grade right now. And if we go around to the corner where I think it's Fur has got a cul-de-sac that's platted, if we started at that elevation there, we could keep a much deeper ditch all the way to Diamond. And I think that would really help with the drainage, because it's not just this house that has a problem, it's also the 3 houses
We've heard from
on the downhill side next to it.
No, something definitely needs to be done, and it's just a matter of what kind of direction we give. Councilmember?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. From Diamond to the highway, do you know how many culverts there are? Because I don't remember very many being.
There's only 1 culvert, and it's at the highway, and it doesn't serve any purpose for this subdivision at all.
So this would involve cleaning out the existing culverts in that neighborhood and then
trying
digging a ditch.
Trying to increase the
flow.
volume of water the speed of the water leaves the subdivision.
Okay. And administration, what do you want from us?
That's a very good question.
A go-ahead to try that, or what?
So I guess there's 2 options. The first would be to kick it back to the flood board and see if they have any interest in tackling that. Nick spoke to that a little bit. And the second option would be to move forward with the city following these recommendations, and I'll give you a third option of do nothing. So those are the 3 options.
Yeah. Vice Mayor Rosen.
So just to clarify, we're not digging this ditch along the south side of Dick Graff Road. How far would this ditch have to go? Because I'm trying to see if we're not just taking this water and pooling it farther down the road toward the highway, are we?
That's exactly what we'd be doing.
We'd be pooling it just farther down the road?
Yes. The difference is that there's no houses down there. The subdivision doesn't drain water anywhere. It just drains water to the lowest place.
I would also like to clarify that option 2 would be us going out for to get a bid for it and then bringing it back to council.
Right. It's not just we're gonna go for it.
Yeah, not just we would go for it, but I would also like to invite the Public Works Director, Doug, to come speak to this as well, since this is in his purview from our end of the...
I was gonna ask for that.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Thanks. Yeah, this is actually, obviously, like you said, if it was an easy fix, it would have been done a long time ago. You're looking at a very, very, very flat area all the way down. What happens is when you bring that out, there's a couple of different things I'm looking at. If you clear the culverts above it, you're bringing more water into this same area, which they're not impacted. They still are draining water, but they're not draining speed-wise and what's going through. It's so flat, you pond up, and as soon as you get even past this subdivision, when we had some good flooding, when Jap Creek had breached and came down, it floods through there. It goes in then right just past this birch and goes in fir spruce and just floods in through all the trees, comes out all the way there, and then comes back out around before it can even go out. You've got a super long distance to make it to the highway. And even at a very low grade to get to the highway, your ditch would be so deep you couldn't get it out that culvert that's there. There's a big culvert that goes under the highway that's meant for flood mitigation. But at the height of that culvert to hit, you'd be 15 feet below that culvert by the time you hit there in that amount of distance. It's a hard one to solve. And I don't know, I agree. I mean, I got lots of friends that live right there. Susie's great. We have old folks that work public works there before. Lloyd's there, on Birch. We have some good folks there that we're trying to see what to help out. But what's coming down through the groundwater, how much is being blocked by the road levee? I pulled this out today. This is a book, basically 2000. Prior to having the levee even up the first part of Jap Creek, and also then all the way along this road to make that levee. And that's why that thing was made, is to keep the Resurrection River and Jap Creek out of the neighborhoods there. We used to cut right down, and even since I got here in 2016, it's breached 3 times to come through and come down the south side of the road and inundates a lot down there. it'll make it and work all the way down, but then it would cut in at the snow dump area at the time, and then go all the way over to Hemlock. So you're kind of looking at this, how's it really go? If you look at some of the old pictures of prior to the road and then after, and just see where the creek and the flooding used to be. This is all floodplain for a reason. Kind of unfortunately cuts right into her yard. House is just out of the floodplain, the yard down below is not. But there's a question I have over there is a different culvert, and it actually comes under her, right into her backyard, but it's an underground culvert, comes from Diamond. I don't know if it's draining groundwater. I look over on Diamond, which is to the west of this, and there's no water really coming in the road there. So it's draining, I believe, some groundwater to it. I don't know anything about that culvert other than a site visit there with it. I don't know, looks like it goes over and kind of underneath right to Diamond, kind of at that straight angle. But where it's gathering that water, or if it's just plain draining groundwater, I don't know.
Wow. Okay, Councilmember Finch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Would adding a culvert and digging the ditch behind the houses there, you think would help?
Do I think it would help? I mean, any type of trying to move it away, you know, getting it from her house and from those neighbors to try to come out, but it just doesn't go that far right now, and to keep going, you could get it down at a depth and just get it to the next neighborhood. But we're just gonna move it down to those next houses, and I don't want any of them flooding, but they already flood with some groundwater also. The groundwater's really high all the way through there. And is it higher because of this levy back in 2001? I mean, the bidding was 2000, so I can't say for sure.
So basically you have no solution in mind then?
It's been a subject that's come up back and forth a little bit. We did go out and try to dig a little bit of a drainage for that little quick area there, and it obviously, that was a year and a half ago, I believe, and it hasn't. We hoped that would help just to get it out of there and start draining it down. And you'd think it would at least make it out of right there, but it seems to just keep gathering.
Okay, I want to fix this, but I don't know how.
And so like Nick said at the beginning, his recommendation is potentially a first step, and we may have to do more options as well and find other solutions, or start there with looking at bigger options here, but looking just for some direction on how council would like us to proceed in that realm.
As much as I hate to just keep going with engineering, over the past couple of years, we've done a lot of engineering, but to really get a drainage plan, is there a way to do it? Does it involve a stormwater lift station? It might be about the only way to do it, but that's a cost, just like a sewer lift station. But it's, how do you do that? I mean, rather than, you know, we all want to get it solved right and get it so it works. So there's some things that it may take a little bit more expertise getting the whole thing surveyed right on down. What's the elevations all the way to the highway? And what do we do at this point? And how do we raise up over that, or do we keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper all the way to the highway, which, I mean, it's already, when you get down to that end from the roadway down, it's 15 feet down there right now.
Councilmember West.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is this something that, so we have the option of showing shoveling out $20,000, $30,000, but do you think this is something that we should hire an engineering firm to come in and develop a solution, or at least give us an idea of a solution?
I think that's one of our steps to do it right. We can keep trying things, but I think, you know, I don't think it's going to be cheap to get the solution, but to get the right solution that you don't just flood the neighbor, you don't just pass it to the next. I mean, if it could just go to the snow dump area and kind of have a pond in there, but it doesn't do that, and then it won't go beyond right now and ends up over on Hemlock. So that would be my recommendation, is actually get some drainage engineering to have a real drainage plan. of how that can be done. That'd be my,
Councilmember.
I'd just make I understand the necessity of it, and I definitely am with everybody in this room about fixing it and everybody that lives over there. But I like to fix things right. And I mean, if we put $20,000, $30,000 into what was referred to as the first step in the right direction, which I absolutely appreciate, but in the first step in the completed direction would be hiring an engineering firm and finding out exactly what the solution is, correct?
it's my recommendation alone. You know, there's been, I hadn't made it to the flood board or the P&Z there to look at that. I was out of town on those, so.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, I wish I'd been able to discuss, because there's always a good discussion to get figured out. That's just my recommendation.
Councilmember Finch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, how long would it take to dig that ditch roughly and clean up that culvert time-wise?
2 or 3 days.
So if we clean out the ditch, clean out the culvert, and hire an engineering firm who at least helped prevent flooding this year, and that engineering firm could come in and measure the ditches and do whatever they're gonna do.
So you're thinking a combination of these two recommendations? Councilmember Barton.
I just think maybe not do the culverts up. Like Doug said, it just can increase the flow into that area. Why not just do the ditch and look into getting a engineering?
You just need parameters. Are we doing the ditch for 100 feet, 200 feet? Are we doing it to the next neighborhood? Are we trying to get it all the way down? Because, like I said, I don't want to be in here in 2 months and have all of Birch in here now. You got Birch, and then you got the next group down on Spruce, and now they're all flooded. So I just want to be sure that we know what we're doing here. You know, and if we're going to say, let's dig a ditch, we want to dig a ditch and make it flow to
Resurrection Bay.
Get it moving.
Could we make a recommendation that we get a plan back on how far, you know, with some of the parameters and the cost, and as a first step?
Yeah, so I think at this point in this discussion, a good recommendation would be for us to convene again with Nick and get some plans forward for a finalized number, because that 20 to 30,000 is his expert opinion off the top of my head. Set some parameters and also look towards our engineering contracts and see about a long-term drainage plan for that area.
That sounds good, and then, right, Councilmember Finch.
Thank you. I'd recommend, because I've seen the flooding in there, is start the ditch at Diamond and take it to the highway and clean out the culvert, at least get that water moving down away from neighborhoods. And
Well,
then
we'll
get
get
all the
some-
engineering firm.
With this,
We can include that in the parameters for the first thing that I said. Sorry, my brain's catching up. I'm writing at the same time. But yeah, we'll include that ditch length down to the to that terminus with Nick and getting that finalized number.
okay. And then we'll hear back and proceed with funding or whatever, because we've got to do something. It's okay. Anything else on this that we've spent considerable time? Okay, one more thing. Can we ask for one more thing before a break? This is to discuss the proposed ordinance for amending the hours of sale of alcoholic beverages on page 173, and this was brought to us by Councilmember Calhoun. Do you want to just... Do we need an overview of this, or do we want to just begin to discuss?
I can just discuss, Madam Mayor, thank you. Yeah, I was approached by somebody in the community to take a look at the possibility of changing the ordinance that limits the sale of alcohol from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. to 0. It's been that way for a while. I've heard stories about when it was not that way. But the thought process on this is to change the ordinance to allow the sale of alcohol starting at 8 a.m. and still ending at 2 a.m. And the reasoning to take a look at this, it's not a bad conversation to have, but to give establishments that sell alcohol, whether it be a restaurant, a bar, liquor store, the option to start earlier in the day than they do now. And part of it comes with the visitor industry and tourists being in town, and people may be wanting to have breakfast somewhere and have a Bailey's and coffee or a Bloody Mary or something, because we have a lot of visitors in town early. And I've talked to a couple of the bar owners downtown, and they say that almost every day, especially during the summer, they get people trying to open their door in the morning before 10 a.m. And so it would give them an option to maybe increase some business. Also, for those that enjoy that kind of thing, for part of the year, football games start at 9 in the morning. And there are places that would like to be able to sell alcohol to people that would like to come in and watch a football game in their establishment. So my thought was to take a look at changing the ordinance, having the discussion. I know there are going to be people that are opposed to it because of selling more alcohol, people that have alcohol problems, things like that. That's all going to come out if we decide to move forward to at least have this discussion. But I think it's not a bad thing. They've done it in Anchorage. And it would allow, again, restaurants that are open for breakfast to do that if they choose to. Mimosas, things like that. It may encourage some restaurants that don't do breakfast to maybe have a breakfast period like that. So I just thought it's not a bad idea to have as a conversation.
Okay, so what the proposal is, I mean, we can discuss it to death tonight, but what you're suggesting is you would direct administration to come back with an ordinance, and then we would have the public hearing. A public hearing?
Yes, so according to code, for a council member to bring forth an ordinance, it needs to be a directive from the entire council. So a yes vote or a directive tonight isn't for or against, it's just to move the conversation forward so that Chris and I and our teams can work on putting this together to bring forward at a future council meeting. Chris would have to clarify on whether or not it would be, how many public hearings it would require.
Yeah.
It would be introduced, and then following the next meeting would be the public hearing.
There would be a public hearing.
So tonight is just the first step to kind of green light the project, to get it going with the appointed officials.
So if we say go with this doesn't mean we're in favor or opposed or anything. It's just to allow the public to weigh in on it. And so that's where we're at. Do we feel that, should we go ahead with it and direct administration to bring an ordinance? You're a yes.
Yeah, I think getting public input is...
Public input, that's the only way we're going to get the public input, other than people just on the street saying, oh my gosh, either way. So I'd say, okay. You know, definitely there's no guarantee that there's going to be a yes vote by council at the end. So are we all good with that?
Yes.
The majority is good with that. Okay. Okay, I think you have direction then to...
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Ordinance. Thank you. Okay, so that was our last item of business, and let's whip into citizen comments. Is there any citizen wishing to, am I wrong? Okay, you get 5 minutes, and you're probably the citizen, or maybe one other. Okay, then we'll take a break before we begin.
I'm Micah Van Buskirk, Inside City Limits. I just wanted to thank you for your discussion tonight, and I wanted to bring just a couple extra points. One, that road has an average annual daily traffic count, this is averaged out over the year, of 2,250 vehicles. Average annual daily traffic count. That road is the #2 most traveled road in our community. It is second only to 3rd Avenue. It's shocking numbers that come out that road. So it's really a big importance, not just to our community, but that state parks, the attendance to the state parks, usage of the state parks has tripled or more. The beach out there is getting excessively high usage. It's just becoming more and more popular. So it's really a community-wide thing, not just a Low Point community. This is all of us. So thank you. There's a lot of support, both from the borough, the state, and our federal legislators to make sure that this happens. I don't think there's going to be a situation where in 10 years we don't have the money, we have to repay this. And when that first got, Doug called me and said, I don't know, my goodness, we have to actually have it done within 10 years. I personally went and met with all of our state legislators at the time. I met with our borough mayor at the time, and I called Senator Sullivan's office again and made sure that they were still supportive of that. She wrote a letter, or Elena Spraker wrote the letter of support for this project. It's got a lot of support. Since then, I've met with Mayor Machicki when he became mayor and made sure this was on his radar of things that are coming up. And yes, the last 1,600 feet of this project is not within the borough, the city, it's within the borough. So it's absolutely something that we should be partnering with the borough to do this. This should not just be a city funded project. So I hope that, I look forward to all those conversations. And Low Point Community Council doesn't have much money, but we do have a lot of energy. So if, I would love to help. This is a big project for our community, really huge importance to our community. And then just some of the specifics that didn't get mentioned earlier. Option 4, while it would be great to get some improvements, there were 15 unstable slopes that were identified in the preliminary engineering, or the preliminary looks at it. Of that, the one that slid was not even identified as an unstable slope, which I think is funny. But for the $2 million that we have left, only 4 or 5 of those would have been able to be addressed with like, they like what you see around Turn Again. They're putting up that screen and some of the supports to hold the rock back. It wouldn't have been all 15 of them that would have been able to be addressed with that $2 million we have left. Option 1 is a great option. It leaves the gravel roadway. It does not allow for much ditching, but the ditching is significant because that's a lot of the issue with the roadbed. It's not just the unstable slopes, it's the condition of the roadbed. It was built by a couple good old boys, years ago with no engineers and no design, and it's just been hodgepodge together for decades. And the roadbed itself needs some upgrades and update, and option 1 does address that, but it does not allow for much ditching. And if you leave it gravel, that ditching will continue to be filled in once, as it's graded and as cars drive down it, the ditching is going to be a lot of maintenance for the city to maintain that ditching. Option 2 does allow it, actually realigns the road closer to the ocean and puts in some very nice 3-foot deep ditches, which would be one of the main reasons for looking at option 2. But I totally understand why option 1 is good. But the first couple pages of this report, if you guys, you don't have to read the whole 95 pages, but the first 10 pages is really interesting, and I encourage everybody to read it. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hey.
Mayor and Council, Cindy Eklund, inside the city limits. I, as your Kenai Peninsula Borough Assembly representative, have discussed with the administration, with the emergency management department at the borough, what options are available for the citizens that live at Low Point that are borough residents. And everything that we've discussed has a lot bigger price tag than option 1 that you looked at. And the other item is that I wanted to just bring up is tomorrow night is a borough assembly meeting, and there is the reconsideration of the bed tax, putting it on the ballot in October. So it would be beneficial to hear from more constituents and community on your wishes on that item. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, brings it back to council and administration comments and responses to citizen comments. Administration.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to give a big thank you to council for the discussion, collaboration, and conversation tonight. Really excited to have a lot of direction moving forward. And a big congratulations to the high school track athletes. Super exciting to see them in here, and we get to celebrate a lot of kiddos, so that's always great.
Okay, Mr. Bickling?
No comments, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Barnwell.
Yeah, the track team is amazing. I'm just wondering if they got all of it, or did your son get all of his talent from your wife, or did you? I know she runs.
No comment.
Also excited to see Little Point moving forward on the road. That's great, and thanks for all the work from you, Micah, and your community council. And the heat loop project's always fun to listen to. I think it's super cool. So, yeah.
Councilmember Price.
I just want to thank everybody that spoke. I think we got a lot accomplished tonight, so that was good.
Councilmember Wells.
Yeah, I echo everything that everybody said. I'm excited to see progress moving forward on Low Point Road, of course, and I will be in Soldotna tomorrow for the meeting, so I will see you there. Thank you.
Councilmember Finch.
I'd like to once again say congratulations, Seward High School, Seward wrestling team. They've been definitely putting Seward on the map this year. Low Point, I'm glad to see that's doing something, because everybody hates driving that road. You know, start small and go big, is what I'll say. But the flooding thing, that definitely needs to be addressed, because when they put the road in, I was like, you could see it was happening. So that's all I got.
Okay, Councilmember Calhoun.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, kudos to the Seward athletes. You know, it's been a really great athletic year for Seward High. So somebody's doing something. Maybe they got good water.
It's the water.
Also, want to say thank you to Mike Moore for all his years of service to the city and the ambulance corps. You know, he's done an amazing job there. So thank you, Mike. And I know he's going to continue with the ambulance corps for a while. A couple of things, and historians can correct me if I am incorrect, but you know, back in the day, the American Legion, and I'm not saying Seward, but the American Legion sponsored a flag contest. There were 142 flags designs submitted, and the one from Seward actually won. July 6, 1927 is Territorial Flag Day. That's when that flag was submitted as the territorial flag. July 9th, tomorrow, is the anniversary of that flag being designated as the state flag. July 9th of 1959. So just something to remember that's out there. You know, great 4th of July. Busy for everybody. Most of us survived. And we look forward to the Salmon Derby.
That's it. Okay, Vice Mayor Osenga.
Yeah, congratulations to for all the accomplishments for our Seward High track team. That's pretty great to hear. Yes, thank you to Mike Moore. Thank you. Happy retirement to him. It was a great 4th of July festival. I had a good time. Went downtown a couple times and went through all the events and saw some racing. And I'd just like to say thank you to everyone that makes that event possible. That's it.
Okay, well, what they said. I'm very impressed with the athletes. We got some good information on the heat loop, and it's been a long evening, and we've got something else to do tonight too. So I think I'll conclude my comments with that and thank everyone. And I'm going to now make a motion to go into executive session. We'll take a break before we have that executive session. So I move to go into executive session to receive legal advice from the city attorney and provide direction on litigation strategy regarding Chugach Electric rate case. Do I need to quote the statute too?
No, that's okay.
Okay. So I made the motion. I need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, and then we need to vote on going into executive session.
Voting on going into executive session, Wells,
Yes.
Alsenga,
Yes.
Kreitz,
Yes.
Finch,
Yes.
Barnwell,
Yes.
Calhoun,
Yes.
and Mayor McClure.
Yes.
Okay, that motion has been approved, and what time would you like to go into the session?
Would 5 minutes be enough of a break? So, in 5 minutes, let's say 9:46, okay, by the time we get done with this. And let me specify who would be in that executive session. It would be council, the attorneys on the telephone, administration.
We would also like to invite City Clerk Chris Peck to stick around if he
Okay.
doesn't object.
Okay, thank you for the
Okay.
invite.
Anyone else? Okay, so,
This is Sam, just sort of for the record and for your information. Cody George from my office is going to call in and I'll conference him. And then Dr. Larry Blank is the city's expert, and I believe if he's still up on whatever his time zone, I think he's going to call in and help explain things too.
okay, so we're going to take about a 5-minute break so we can clear out the room except for us, and we'll be back and we'll do the executive session. Thank you very much, everyone that showed up.
back on the air.
Okay, I'm going to bring us back from executive session back to our session. It is 10:04. We had an executive session, and now I will adjourn the meeting at 10:04.
Somebody forgot their